welcome to the first official episode of the Plutus Awards podcast. My name is Chris Browning, and I am thrilled to be your host. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this podcast, we plan to share these stories from bloggers to podcasters, writers, speakers, and more. To kick things off, I'm joined by probably one of my favorite people of all time.
Hi, my name is Erin Lowry. I am the creator of Broke Millennial, and I started the blog 6 years ago. The first book came out in 2017, and I do this because I just want to get more people talking about money and comfortable with the idea of controlling their finances.
So let's meet today's guest. Erin, thank you for coming in and joining me here on the show. How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Appreciate you joining me. It's always nice talking to somebody on the other side of the country over there on the East Coast, which I never, ever visit. So thanks for joining me over here.
What do you mean you don't visit? You got to come over here. I've spent so much time on the West Coast so far this year.
It's too far away.
Yeah, I know. I've been over there twice and road trip down the whole thing.
What I'll do is I'll just wait for you to come out here since you're always just traveling around. That's when I'll just catch you. That way I don't have to go to the East Coast. You just come to my side here and it'll all work out. So I'm excited for that.
Although you'll be in DC for FinCon, right?
Oh, that is right. So yeah, I get see. There we go. See, I need a reason to come out there. That'll bring me out there. But you know what brought you out here was your amazing book tour that you did for your latest book, which came out in April of 2019, Broke Millennial Takes on Investing. And, first of all, congratulations on the book and finishing up the tour.
Thank you. I'm tired.
I mean, you were doing a lot. So you hit 9 cities in 6 weeks across the U.S. and in Canada. So that was a lot of traveling.
It was. My frequent flyer mile account looks very good right now, which was exciting. Working on that next status level on Delta, which was a big part of how I was conceiving of flight patterns and trips. Really not kidding, which is the best part of that. I was definitely gaming the system. Originally, the idea was to go for 4. Then it just kind of blew up in a good way, in a way I didn't totally anticipate, but turned into 9 cities in 6 weeks. And a lot of that was just opportunities kept coming up. And I wanted to do it in a short period of time just to kind of go in and go hard and call it a wrap. But for anyone listening who is interested in doing a book tour and you want to do more than a handful of cities, please extend it over the course of the year. Do it in chunks. It's a lot of work.
I can imagine, because not only are you, having to get these locations, travel to them, and then, be in a mindset to, host and present at these events, it's a lot in a very short period of time. And so I want to know, Erin, why would you do this? Why did you do this book tour?
The big reason, honestly, was because the topic of the book was investing. And I feel that that is a topic that's best served in conversation. And a lot of people had reached out to me on mostly Instagram and Twitter and email as well, and had so many questions, which was part of the reason I wrote the book in the first place. But then I wanted to be able to connect in a way that made it feel really accessible. And I think in-person conversations is the best way to do that. So the whole concept of the book tour from the beginning was, this is not your average book tour. I'm not popping up at bookstores. I'm not going to libraries. This isn't signings. This is me hosting a full-on event. You're going to come, you're going to get food and drinks, and we're going to mingle and talk. And then we're going to sit down and have a panel discussion for about an hour on everything you need to know as a rookie investor. There were a bit of changes throughout the tour. Some spots was more of a Q&A style with me and one other person, but most of them were this panel discussion forum, which then also gave me an opportunity to have voices other than my own, because I functioned as a moderator in that scenario, because my voice is all through the book, as well as the experts that I interviewed, some of whom sat on the panels throughout the tour, which was really cool. But I also ensured that it wasn't just me. It wasn't just people who looked like me and came from my background. We had a variety of voices, because it makes for a much more interesting conversation.
Yeah, no, it really did. And I'm really happy that I got a chance to catch your tour when you came out here to LA. It took me, I almost could have flown to New York in the amount of time it took me to drive to LA to get to the tour. But it was well worth it. It was a really great event. I mean, you had a great turnout. It's very, I think, like welcoming. You had a good crowd there. And then you went up there with Kristen Wong and you talked about investing, hit a lot of great points, and really engaged the people who were there. And I think that was a really cool element to add to, I think, the experience of your book, because, as a reader, what's better than getting to talk to the author and ask questions and follow up on things that maybe you didn't quite understand, or maybe you wanted more info on. And I think you created a really cool environment for that.
Thank you. Actually, one of the best compliments I got on the tour was in Chicago. And a woman came up to me at the end and said, I'm really excited to meet you in person. And I've listened to you on different podcasts and I follow you on Instagram. And it was really cool that anytime someone asked you a question, I was pretty sure I knew how you were going to answer it. And it was neat that you were consistent. I was like, oh, great. Glad I'm consistent across the board.
Exactly.
And I loved in the LA event, you were there, my sister, who actually helped produce the tour, which was a big reason I was able to do it to really the high quality that it was and the caliber that it was. She's so good at her job. I think LA was, all right, let me think it through. We had New York, Seattle, Portland. So LA was 5. LA was event number 5. She had heard a lot of the questions, a lot of the topics multiple times at that point. So she became the voice of the audience. Actually, from the audience, she would walk around the room. And if I said something or if Kristen said something and we didn't elaborate on it enough, she would, from kind of speaker in the back, be like, what do you mean by fiduciary? And do stuff like that. Or if we, were talking on a point and then started to get away from it, she would kind of gently bring us back, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, no, I remember that because I was sitting on the side where she was standing, and
Yep.
she would just chime in from the back, and I was like, "That's great." She's got this. You guys had a routine going. You'd been through this, so she knew where people would have questions. Maybe because sometimes you're afraid to ask a question in a group setting. You want to be the one who's like, "I don't know what this means." So it was great to have her there advocating on behalf of of us in the crowd who were too scared to say anything.
Yep, she did a very good job of that.
Well, I mean, that really leads into the next question I had for you was, how did you coordinate this event? Because it sounds like your sister played a big role in this.
She played a huge role. And for context, what's really neat is she actually is a producer in her day-to-day life. She lives in LA. And it was really such a joy and privilege to get to watch her do her thing. And she had never done event planning quite on this level, but she's produced music videos. She's also had a short that she wrote and directed and produced that went to Tribeca. She's worked on so many different things and she's quite accomplished in her own right. And I asked her very early on when I was thinking through this, like, hey, could you come on and help me with this? And I'll pay you. And it also was, we live on different coasts. I'm in New York, she's in LA. And it was so nice that we got this really 6 weeks of getting to travel together in addition to putting it all up together. And that provided a very safe space for me that when I had moments of just wanting to completely break down, which trust me, I did, it was my sister. I could cry, I could rant, I could yell, obviously away from clients and, people. It was in private, but I was able to have those kind of moments of release. And also I was able to be very forthcoming and honest about issues. If I was, feeling like, hey, we have this deadline, we need to do this, I could be very direct and my normal self. And I knew that she wasn't going to get offended because she also knows, like, I'm not mad at her. I'm just be like, this is what we need to do by this time. This is this. And it was just so, I'm not going to say easy because it wasn't easy, but partnering with my sister, which for some people, I've had people be like, I could never work with my family. I'm very fortunate and lucky. And it's just wonderful. We have complementary skill sets like that. But she also just thinks through so many different things. For example, event insurance. Well, I didn't know that was a thing. And,
I didn't either.
Right. And also it was great for even finding the venues. I had a very specific image in my mind of what I wanted these events to look like. And I wanted it to feel more like you're going to a very chic, upscale networking event that was more like cocktails and fun and not sitting in a classroom and learning. And that really was the environment of every single event. It was not at a bookstore. It was not at a library. It wasn't in anything that kind of felt like, now just sit down and listen to us talk. It was like, no, let's hang out and engage and unwind and get real with each other about money.
Yeah, you really could feel that in the environment. It was very unique. It wasn't like a typical bookstore presentation where everyone's sitting out in the crowd and the one person's up there with their book in their hand. This was very interactive, very comforting environment. And I think what you mentioned about your sister, I think it sounds like having someone who you can trust and who you work well with is the key to pulling off an event of this size and of this span of distance between each location.
Yeah, it really is. You have to have somebody that's going to handle the small details. I think I'm terrible at outsourcing generally. That's something I've been very vocal about. I'm not good with it. I don't even currently have a VA, which if you're listening and you're an experienced VA and would like to talk to me, hit me up because I it's a control thing, right? And this is
Yeah.
a flaw in myself and in trying to create and build my brand. But I also know that I can't scale without ceding some of that control and allowing people to help me and set up systems. And it was just wonderful to see my sister come in, and she had systems for how to handle certain things and how to do a budget, which I'd never done events. I didn't really have a good sense of how much certain things were going to cost. And if we had, for example, a step and repeat go missing in transit, I didn't have to handle it. She had to handle it,
Mm.
which was nice because I was having to handle finding the panelists, prepping the panelists, sourcing the questions, answering and dealing and interfacing with the sponsors and pitching people and all of that, which we can also come back to sponsorship if you want, because that's another way that this was a very different event than a lot of
I'm
them.
happy you said that because that was like next on my list. But I want to first touch on the venues themselves. So you were in 9 different cities, and obviously that means you're in 9 different locations within those cities. So how did you go about getting these locations, finding them, I know, coordinating with them, and the whole process? Because I have no idea where you even start with something like that.
Again, this is where producers is a huge help. For me, it was an interesting mix. So New York, for instance, we had a very specific vision of what we wanted. We had a first venue that we thought we were going to be able to go with. And then unfortunately, or fortunately for us, unfortunately for the partnership with that venue, the scale of the event got much bigger than expected. I
Mm.
had no idea. We were selling tickets. It was actually costing people money to come to all of these events. And when you charge, you're never quite sure how many people are going to show up. We thought, well, I don't know, maybe 80. New York City for me is home field advantage. I've got actual, my friends here in addition to Broke Millennial community and all of that. We thought maybe 80. Well, we ticketed up to 116. As that started to scale, we eclipsed what the first venue could accommodate. So we, about 6 weeks out, had to find a different venue because it was just going more and more. And I knew that even close to the end, we were going to sell more tickets. So then it became this whole search of what can we find that, it's easy to have vendors come in. There are some places that do exclusivity deals where if you book with that venue, you can only use these particular vendors and then it ups the cost. And we found a raw space that allowed us to negotiate with outside vendors, but we had to build it up from bring in chairs, bring in tables, bring in food, bring in decor. The New York City event was the most time consuming one. It took us about 6 hours to set it up.
Mm. Wow.
I felt like it was my wedding 2.0. Like it was a lot of work. And it showed. I mean, you really could see there's a lot of attention to detail down to the fact that the cupcakes had, the sponsor's brand and my brand on it with little, edible tags on top. It's very small, and there was M&Ms that were color coordinated, and it was all that kind of stuff. But I digress from your original question, which was how we find the venues. Kaylin, my sister, she did a really good job. She has to do that obviously through producing, especially for music videos. And there are different websites. I'm gonna blank on the name. I think Space Finder and like Peer. There's 2 websites that you can look for venues, and you can put in the date, how many people, the hours you're looking for. Different cities have different union laws, which is also where certain things get very strict. Chicago and San
Mm.
Francisco were very particular about if you were serving alcohol, you had to have a bartender on site. It couldn't just be self-serve, which other ones, it was self-serve, but we had a rider for it in the not a rider, a clause for it in the vent insurance that we're serving alcohol, but we're not selling alcohol. If you sell
Mm.
alcohol, then it's a whole different thing. There's just all of these complicated rules that a producer handles for you, which is great. And Kaylin did a lot of, I had given her specifics of this is what I want. I looked at pictures and I pulled pictures from events that I had gone to and said, this is kind of the feel that I'm going for. And then we were able to narrow down on these websites, spaces that were available that were somewhat within our budget. Now, when you're talking about also going to all these different cities, some of the ways that I negotiated sponsorship was in kind as opposed to just a flat out cash deal, because that way the sponsor might have a space that they could provide, whether it's their office spaces or maybe a venue that they own or something that they have easy access to. And then if they provide the space and the food, that was going to take care of a lot of us having to come in and find a place and set it up and deal with all the vendors. So that was also some of it, is getting a little creative with sponsorship opportunities.
Okay. So then would that cover their, I guess, sponsorship fee for you, or would it be that it would just kind of offset whatever you would normally request of a sponsor?
So it did, they didn't pay a check then. That was their payment. It was like an in-kind service. So
Got
yeah, and then we would negotiate like, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, that's equivalent to this tier of sponsorship. So in exchange for providing the space and the food and a doorman, you're going to get X number of, plugs and mentions, and you can have somebody sit on the panel and all of that kind of stuff. Now, the one that I think is the most interesting is the one you came to, which was LA, because that was a non financial services partnership, which was really quite unique. And that was totally my sister's idea. Company's name is Bando, and they're actually a clothing and accessories company based in LA. And they do I think it's, I don't know which Wednesday of the month, but for those of you in LA, they do this session called Honor Roll, where they like to have events that you can come and learn, and they're educational. And so we asked them, hey, would you want to partner? And for this month, in addition to doing your honor roll, doing this as a opportunity to also reach out to your audience and share more about investing and talk about money, which is a lot of creatives and people who are part of their community then came, which was totally cool. And there was an ice cream truck, which was definitely my favorite perk of the book tour.
I was so sad I missed it. The LA traffic kept me away and I got there too late. I was like, oh, why? Why? Well, now that we're talking about the sponsor that you work with and coordinate the space in LA, how did you go about reaching out to these sponsors, and how did you find them, and what's that process even like?
I mean, for me, a lot of it is I've been doing the personal finance shtick, if you will, for 6 years at this point. And I have a lot of relationships with a lot of people at different companies. So that was a big part of it, was reaching out to all of my contacts and saying, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. I actually worked with a designer to help create a pitch deck. So I had one that was explaining what the overall purpose of the tour was, to make sure that it was understood. This is not me going into bookstores. This is me getting in front of millennials who are eager investors and really just want to understand investing and know where to put their money. And this is exactly the kind of customer avatar that you want. And I'm getting them in a room for you. In exchange for that, here are my partnership opportunities. And then I had tiers of different things that people could do in order to partner with me on different tour stops.
Is this something that you just picked up as practice from just years of doing this and kind of knowing what works and how to lay these things out for potential sponsors?
It was a mix. I'm very fortunate that there are a lot of people in this community who have done events before. So I reached out to quite a few of them and asked what worked, what didn't work when you did events and when you pitched sponsors. And I had certainly some learning curves and opportunities that now, if I do it next time, I know better and I'll be able to pitch in a different and more nuanced way, if you will. And I will say the whole pitching tiers was kind of a conceit that I came up with, because I thought, well, it's not always easy to get somebody to come on at a big dollar sign number, but you might be able to get 2 or 3 that come on at a more modest dollar sign number. And that gives you just more opportunity at each tour stop.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That makes sense. Give them options, and you bring in people who maybe, like you said, don't want to spend that much money but want to be involved in some form. So I like that. Coming up with new creative tactics there. I'm going to write this down.
And I will also say, because I got asked a lot in the beginning, why are you charging tickets if you're getting sponsorship? And a big part of it was, well, twofold, honestly. One, people don't tend to show up if it's a free event, but if they pay for it, they do tend to show up. But I also wanted to make sure that it was affordable. And for the caliber that I was doing, I would have to charge about $200 a ticket to even get close to what I was trying to do. And I did not profit off of this book tour. In fact, I was a little bit in the red, not significantly. I was a little worried for a minute how deep in the red I was going to go, but I definitely did not make a profit. And typically you don't, to be honest, at least not the first couple times you go out. But I charged tickets to make sure that butts were in seats at the event. And then also I brought sponsors on so that I could offer those tickets at a very reasonable price point, because I was very worried that if I didn't do that, it was going to be much less quality, and I didn't want the quality to suffer. And I also was very clear to make sure that people understood, if you come to an event, depending on when you got your ticket and depending on the city, tickets were between $20 and $40, depending on if it was early bird and which city and what you got at the event. But you always got food and drinks. And in addition, you also got a tote bag and a copy of the book, and then some other assorted goodies depending on which stop.
Yeah, it was a legit bag that came with the ticket there. So I think people really like that. I think that was a real. It felt like something really tangible and valuable that they were getting for actually attending it, in addition to the event itself. So I know I really like that. That was a really good idea. And the last thing I'm going to ask you, Erin, before we get out of here is this was a lot of work. As as I'm talking to you, I'm just hearing how much work this actually was to put this event together, and really in a short period of time. And so, does this take a toll on you? Organizing all this, traveling so much in such a short period of time, like how does this impact you?
It's a lot. It was about 6 months of work. It honestly should have been longer. I should have started pitching companies earlier than I did. I started in November for an April event, and well, April and May events. Yeah, it was hard because the book came out at the same time, and launching a book on its own is so much work. And
Mm.
you basically have to constantly be on. You're recording, whether it's podcasts or media hits or writing, or you're just engaging on social media. You have to be on all the time and constantly making sure that your book is getting mentioned and plugged and reaching out to everybody that you know to try to ensure that that's happening. And in addition to that, I was also trying to mount this tour and getting tickets sold and promoting it and trying to make sure that the right people in the right cities knew that it was coming in so that they could share it with their networks. And I was really burned out. So
Mm.
we're recording, for people who are listening, we're recording in early June. And I would say that I'm still very much in the throes of burnout from both the tour, which wrapped on May 16th, and the actual release of the book, because it's so much work. And funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago, my friend Kristen Wong tweeted something about, do you feel a depression when a big project ends? And I texted her, I was like, yeah, girl, right now.
Mm.
And it's not so much oh, it's over. It's you get so backed up in your real life and feel so overwhelmed once you come out of it. I was on the road for 6 weeks, not earning an income because I couldn't do any work that actually makes me money while I was out there on the road. And then I just kind of was hoping on blind faith that some projects were going to line up for June and July, and things that I thought were going to fall into place didn't. So financially, I was starting to stress when I got back because now I haven't earned money for 6 weeks and I didn't have anything big on the books. So I was getting a little panicky about, bills and
Right.
life. And I was then also having to pay everything off from the tour, which cost more money than I expected it to. In addition to having to pay the people who worked, I paid my panelists, I paid the people that worked for me. And it was incredibly overwhelming. Even now, I still have to finish the final budget and do my Q2 quarterly estimated taxes. And there's
Oh,
just little things like that while it is so fun, and I was so grateful and overwhelmed and overjoyed by the community that was there and the number of people who came out, and I know now that I want to do more in-person events, I also know that I have to protect myself and my mental health and my well-being in tandem, and I didn't do that well this time. And I think that I just like to really give of myself in those moments, and I get a lot of joy from connecting with people in person. And then I would leave the event and connect with everyone who had messaged me on Instagram and try to respond to emails. My email is still about 100. I'm now at 175 unread emails.
oh,
Like, I'm that backed up
that's
from the
stressing me out.
from the tour. Like, I still have things that are unread from mid-May because I'm still trying to get through it. And I want to make it clear that I am not complaining, because I very much understand that not a lot of people get to do this. I now have 2 books out with one of the biggest publishers in the world, and that is huge. And I'm so grateful for that. But I also want to make it very clear that, oh, I know it comes out looking like just a cover of a magazine style awesome when it's on Instagram. They're like, you're going to all of these cities and all these people are coming out to see you and they're paying to come out to see you. And the quality of this is so high. And wow, how are you doing this? Partly because I had help, and also because I didn't have a life for 6 weeks. And then that took a toll on the back end. And also, a few listeners might also know I was recently married. And so having to also make sure that I'm giving attention to my husband and giving attention to my friends and investing back into my relationships in this framework, it's a lot of work. And he's very understanding and did not give me any sort of grief. But there was one moment, and I know I'm going on and on, but there was just one moment that I had come back. I would only really be back for maybe like 3 days at a time before I had to go back out on the road. And I was home and I was supposed to be going to book club. And I really like being part of this book club. But to get to where the particular meeting was that day was going to be an hour and 20 minutes each way, because I live in Queens. It was deep in Brooklyn. And I actually swiped into the subway. The train comes up and I just started crying.
Mm.
And I texted him. I was like, I can't do this. I'm coming home. And I even get like choked up thinking about it now. I had barely seen him in weeks. And I had made a commitment to go to book club and I felt like I needed to go do that. And I just had a total meltdown that I was coming back from this tour and still overscheduling myself. And I was like, I have to come home. We need to just have a day together and just do nothing. And that's exactly what we did. And I felt very re-energized after that. But I think it's also learning how to set boundaries. And I'm terrible at that too. I'm working on it. But I do think that anytime you see someone going out and doing these grand things, which many people in our community do, and it's awesome and it looks super cool, and I know it's very easy to get jealous of them. I definitely get jealous of certain people, but just know that there's a back end toll if you're not really careful in protecting yourself.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, one, for being honest and sharing that, because I know it's not easy to be so, I guess, transparent about what you're feeling and what you're going through. And I mean, what you're experiencing is real. And I think everyone experiences this at different degrees. I mean, not everyone's doing such a big event, but having this responsibility and taking all these tasks and trying to find that balance is so hard to do. And I'm right with you, where I definitely don't give myself time to relax and give those breaks, because you want to take advantage of every opportunity and really engage with the people who are talking to you. And it's so easy to just schedule your entire life away and not give yourself time to really just be in your life and relax and enjoy that downtime. And I think it just makes it that much harder to keep going if you just continue to just pack your schedule full. And so thank you for sharing that. I think that is really important to talk about, because us on the outside, who I think highly of you and the work you do and respect everything that you're doing, I think we see the great end product of all the work, but we're not actually sitting there going through all the hours that it took to make that happen. So thank you for pointing that out and really bringing that to the attention of people listening, because it's real and it's something that we all should be mindful of and kind of protect ourselves, like you said, and give ourselves that room.
It is. And I will say something for me that's been really helpful since is I joined a really good mastermind group that's a very small group of women and all people that I know pretty well to begin with, which is helpful because I feel like they have a lot of context of who I am as a person outside of Broke Millennial coming into the group. But having that we meet weekly, it is like, this is on your calendar. This is an unmissable meeting unless something huge comes up. And having that level of accountability, but having people that I, in a very safe space, can be completely honest with and forthcoming and share these kind of feelings, but also get very helpful feedback at the same time. And it's not just like, oh yeah, just go watch some Real Housewives, which is definitely what I want to do most of the time. It's like, no, you need to be setting these boundaries and doing these things and letting this go. And this is how you can actually move forward. And I highly recommend those kind of support systems for people who have these moments. And that support system shouldn't necessarily be your friends and your spouse, because I think you also shouldn't always dump all of the business issues on them. Not that they shouldn't know. I feel like I'm treading into dangerous territory here. I think, of course, you have those conversations, but my husband's a public school teacher. When I have freelancer or self-employment things, he will listen, he will be empathetic, but he doesn't understand in the same way someone who's in my position does. And it's helpful to have people who do something similar to you to discuss these with, because they can problem solve in a very different way.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. Shout out to my mastermind group. It changes a lot, because, like you said, it's a lot different talking to someone who knows kind of where you're coming from and knows the experience and the process and what goes into it, than someone who's supportive, but they're just like, oh, that's really cool, yeah, great, and that's all they can really add, because they're like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, good job. It's a completely different experience. So that's a great recommendation. I highly recommend mastermind groups, because it's a great experience, a great place to kind of, I think, recharge a little bit and connect with other people. So Erin, thank you so much for sharing all of this information and really being open, and I think giving a great inside look at what a book tour actually takes, especially one of quality, which yours definitely was. And so if people want to connect with you, maybe they have some questions for you, which I want to say, don't send an email. I think you have enough emails, but maybe maybe contact you some other way.
If you do send an email, just have patience that it could be a while before you hear back.
Oh, so what's the best way for people to reach out to you? What is your preferred method if people want to, find out what you're doing, or even if there's something going on you want to let people know about?
I'm pretty active on Instagram if you want to just see what I'm doing. I'm pretty active in Instagram stories, and that's at Broke Millennial blog. I'm also on Twitter at Broke Millennial. Happy to engage both those platforms. I love chatting. If you see me at FinCon, please approach me. I have had people be like, I wasn't sure if I could come talk to you. You can come talk to me. It's fine. And also, I'm like, what vibes am I giving off that people don't feel like they can come talk to me? This is a problem.
The first time I met you was at FinCon 2017.
Yeah.
And I felt the exact same way. I was like, oh, it's Erin. No, I don't want to bother. And you actually, I don't know I feel like you talked to me first, and you were very
I talked to you.
Normal.
I think I am I just almost cried on this podcast. I'm pretty normal. And definitely, please. My joke to people, I think I'm like, no one is like that level of a big deal. You can come talk to anyone that is here. Like, we are all very, like, at all levels. Everybody at FinCon super chill. So please talk to people. And also, you can certainly email me. Just be warned that it could take a while for me to respond.
Okay, so Instagram, Twitter, and in person are I think the order, and then email at the very end of that is the last way to contact you.
Yeah, and I'm based in New York too, so I always love hearing when people are coming through New York, or if you're in New York, and we sporadically have meetups, and that's always a great opportunity too.
Well, perfect. And we'll make sure we put all that in the show notes. That way people can easily find it. Now have to stop their car or stop running and write this all down. So thank you, Erin. I really appreciate your time. And it's always a good time talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate all of you joining me for the first episode. And big thanks to Erin Lowry for helping me get things started. If you enjoyed what you heard, you are in luck because we have 2 more episodes ready to go for you. In the next episode, I'm joined by Stephen Hughes from nomoney.org. And then we have Tiffany Aliche, aka the Budgetnista. So make sure you're subscribed so you get these episodes and more, because we'll be coming to you every Wednesday with some amazing guests here on the Plutus Awards podcast. You can learn more about our guests and the Plutus Awards podcast at plutusawards.com/podcast and on Instagram at Plutus Awards. Again, thanks so much for joining us, and keep creating.